Secondary school pupils in England are being asked to wear face masks in classrooms to reduce the spread of Omicron. The government says it is temporary guidance to keep as many pupils as possible in school. Unions have welcomed the move.
If that's going to do what we all want and keep young people in their school or in their college, then that will, I think, be a price worth paying.
Warnings of a worst-case scenario of a quarter of staff in the public sector being off work because of COVID. But the government says there's still nothing in the data to warrant further restrictions in England. Also in the programme tonight, fire engulfs the Parliament building in South Africa. A man is arrested on suspicion of arson.
How was your previous session?
With growing demands on our health service, could robots in our hospitals be part of the solution? And after more than a quarter of a century, standing is back at Premier League football matches. Hello, good evening. There's new guidance that secondary school pupils in England should go back to wearing masks in class to slow the spread of the Omicron variant. It's hoped the move will prevent disruption of the new school term, and the guidance will bring England into line with the rest of the UK. Unions have welcomed it, but they are warning that staff shortages could again lead to some children being taught at home. Sancha Berg reports.
In Scotland, pupils have been wearing masks as they learn, with the windows open, for the last few months. The picture's similar now in Northern Ireland and Wales.
The A is definitely the better response. So why
Next week, English secondary students will follow suit as the government tries to reduce the spread of COVID in schools. Around half of children over 12 have been double jabbed, not enough to keep the virus out.
The face coverings is very much a short-term measure, simply to the 26th of January when it will be reviewed, because we recognise that it is not something that many children will want to wear. It recognises the priority of ensuring face-to-face education is made available. That's our number one priority.
Some are worried that this could affect children's learning, which has been so disrupted for the last 2 years.
And goodness is very low risk to children. So I'm very wary. I will listen to what the government says, but I am very wary about imposing masks on children in schools because I worry about their well-being, their anxiety and their mental health, which has already suffered because of school closures during lockdown.
Good morning. But it's backed for now by the teaching unions.
If this is a short-term fix, as the government says, and one of a number of different measures, including ventilation and moving Ofsted to the sidelines, if that's going to do what we all want and keep young people in their school or in their college, then that will, I think, be a price worth paying.
So what difference will it make to transmission in the classroom?
Masks work in several ways. First of all, they trap the virus if you are infected and don't know it. They protect you from incoming virus if you're not infected and you don't know that you're talking to somebody who's infected. But also the masks, if you wear them, stop you from picking your nose, scratching, picking your lip, and self-inoculating that way. So the masks have several benefits. And also if you're wearing a mask, it's actually, people tend to be more careful.
But being more careful can come at a price for education.
It's helpful for some parts, and it's not helpful because when you're asked a question and your teacher doesn't understand what you're saying, they're going to have to tell you to repeat it until the point you have to take your mask off and repeat it, and then they will understand. But it's helpful because the COVID is spreading a lot and it's affecting a lot of people in the UK.
Nobody wants another lockdown where even with support from schools, children fall behind with their lessons, become vulnerable, isolated, even put at risk. But across England, head teachers are looking at contingency plans. They'll only know next week whether to put them into effect when they can see how many staff and pupils are absent with Omicron. Sancha Berg, BBC News.
Well, public sector leaders have been told to prepare for the worst-case scenario of up to a quarter of their staff being off work because of COVID. The UK has seen record numbers of daily cases over the festive period. Ministers have been asked to develop robust contingency plans in case of large-scale workplace absences. Here's our business correspondent, Katie Prescott.
This Cumbria care firm has been short-staffed and finding it tough to recruit for a while. Bosses say they've got enough work for at least another 40 people. Now Omicron has decimated their rotas.
It's going to be difficult. We may be in a position as a care sector where not everybody's going to get the care they need. That's the unfortunate truth. We are not going to be able to provide care for everybody that needs it, and that's obviously a major worry.
This lack of carers has a knock-on impact on hospitals too, as people are unable to be sent back home once they're well enough. It's what's happening there that's a real worry. To try and keep vital services like hospitals open, public sector leaders are being asked to make contingency plans for having 10, 20 or even up to 25% of their staff off at any one time. And solutions to that could include drawing on pools of former workers, former teachers in schools, for example, or prioritising certain services. Shortages are also hitting the hospitality industry. This popular Italian restaurant had to shut before Christmas as staff fell ill.
We got to a point at the end of the first week where we were very short-staffed, but we managed to work a rota. We managed to get those remaining staff to pick up shifts. But around the 22nd, we finally reached the sort of critical mass of casualties. And of 24 staff, we ended up with just 5 who were negative, me included.
When it comes to businesses such as restaurants and bars, ministers across the UK are being asked to look at just how bad things could get and to work out what they need to keep going through this time. Labour says this announcement shows the government is leaving contingency planning to the very last moment. The most recent restrictions in England, set out in the government's Plan B earlier in December, are expected to be reviewed this week. Katie Prescott, BBC News.
Well, due to the holiday period, the government's latest coronavirus figures are not complete, but there were 137,583 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period in England and Wales alone. 73 deaths were recorded, that's of people who died within 28 days of a positive test in England and Wales. And our political correspondent Damien Grammaticus joins me now. Damien, the government's still saying that nothing in the data warrants any further restrictions in England, but there is an important review this week.
Yes, that's right, Ben. So these measures we have in England at the minute, they were brought in, remember, back in middle of December, and there was a big battle in Parliament at the time. Remember, a rebellion, 100 Conservative MPs, some of them talking about Boris Johnson being in the last chance saloon. That was all about, so we had the mask wearing, work from home and COVID passes. Other parts of the United Kingdom have gone further already. Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, they have some distancing measures, limits on people who can meet in some places, nightclubs closed. Here, as cases are rising, what ministers have been saying today is that, as you say, no sign in the data at the minute of need for more restrictions for which they'd have to go back to Parliament. But they are bringing in these other things that we're talking about, so mask wearing in schools, contingency planning. Labour's been very critical today, saying the time for contingency planning was weeks ago, sorting out ventilation in schools months ago. But I think the key things to watch are actually going to be that hospitalisation data and also the pressure on workforces, the NHS in particular. Doctors' unions talking about already being under extreme pressure, possibly affecting care. And the meeting over Christmas and New Year, all the effects of that are still to work their way through. OK, Damien, thank you very much. A second 15-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder following a stabbing in South London. Zayan Amarbali-Lena, who was also 15, died after being stabbed in the heart at Ashburton Park in Croydon on Thursday. Another 15-year-old boy who was arrested on suspicion of murder has been released on bail. And meanwhile, a 16-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murder following the death of a teenager in West London on Thursday. The 16-year-old victim was stabbed in a park in the Hillingdon area and has not yet been formally identified. A huge fire has ripped through the South African Parliament building in Cape Town, causing extensive damage and destroying the National Assembly. Police have arrested a man who is facing charges of housebreaking, theft and arson. Our Southern Africa correspondent, Nomsa Maseko, reports.
An historic building on fire. Plumes of smoke engulfing South Africa's parliament. Within hours, The fire tore through the complex and completely destroyed the main debating chamber. More than 60 firefighters battled to extinguish the blaze. The damage is significant, and there are fears that some parts of the structure, which was built in the late 1800s, could collapse.
The entire parliamentary complex is severely damaged, waterlogged and smoke damaged. So there's going to be damage extensively. The roof above the old assembly chamber the old assembly hall is completely gone.
Many high-profile South African politicians, including President Cyril Ramaphosa, were in Cape Town for the funeral of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, which took place at St. George's Cathedral, a block away from the Parliament precinct.
This is devastating news. It's a terrible and devastating event, particularly after we gave the Arch what I would call the best send-off yesterday.
The minister responsible for government infrastructure said firefighters managed to contain the blaze from spreading further.
This is a very sad day for our democracy because Parliament is the home of our democracy, and Parliament is also a strategic key point.
The building was empty for the New Year holidays, and no casualties were reported.
This is the second fire in South Africa's Parliament in less than 10 months. The first was caused by an electrical fault. This time around, a suspect has been arrested and faces charges of arson, housebreaking and theft. He's expected to appear in court on Tuesday.
Nomsa Masego, BBC News, Cape Town.
Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has announced his resignation less than 2 months after being reinstated as part of a political agreement with the military. It comes after another day of protest against the country's military rule. Sudanese forces fired tear gas at tens of thousands of protesters in the capital Khartoum and shot dead 2 people in the city of Omdurman. Thousands of people in Amsterdam have been protesting against the Dutch government's coronavirus lockdown measures. Riot police were used to break up the gathering. The Netherlands went into a sudden lockdown on December the 19th, with the government ordering the closure of all but essential shops, as well as restaurants, hairdressers and gyms. 20 Conservative MPs and peers have called on the Prime Minister to tackle the spiralling cost of living. 5 ex-ministers are among those who have written to the Sunday Telegraph arguing for a cut in environmental levies and the removal of energy taxes. Their call follows big rises in wholesale gas prices. The government says it is meeting suppliers and the regulator regularly to work out how to help consumers. Denmark says it hopes to end the use of fossil fuels on domestic flights by 2030. The Danish Prime Minister says flying must be made green, but acknowledged the target would be hard to meet. Denmark had already announced plans to reduce carbon emissions by 70% of 1990 levels by the year 2030. Now, even after the pandemic has subsided, the National Health Service is still likely to be facing rising demand for healthcare, combined with staff shortages. So, one question that is being asked is, could robots help? Robots are already being trialled in one hospital, where both patients and staff are trying to get used to new methods of automated care. Here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
How was your previous session?
Good.
Cool. Do you want to do exercise again?
Physiotherapy, robot style.
Extend your arms out to the side like me.
Could this be the long-term future of some NHS care? Here at Southmead Hospital in Bristol, they're experimenting with a robot programmed to interact with patients for simple forms of physio. Another possible use might be basic bedside checks.
Remember not to take your medication on an empty stomach.
Use for real is still some way off, but hospital leaders think this could help ease workforce pressure.
Everyone understands that people want more out of healthcare as they live longer. We have not enough workforce to deliver those demands. And of course, robotics and technology can be taught to do mundane, repeat, menial tasks.
The hospital's working with the Bristol Robotics Laboratory, looking at future care of patients in their own homes. This device can be controlled remotely to help with basic household tasks.
OK, I'm sending Chiron to you now. Be careful as it moves.
Technology can clearly help those who need assistance at home, but might people feel they lose out from lack of human contact?
In no way are we looking to replace people, because I myself wouldn't want that. So I wouldn't want to think about that as a possibility for anyone else. The idea here is to augment and improve the care provision and the quality of care that can be provided.
Attention, automatic transport.
And away from patients, there's automation. Robotic portering delivers most supplies around the hospital, including to operating theatres and meals for the wards. They even have their own lifts. Because they do the heavy manual work, staff injuries have been reduced. Robot technology is also at work in the hospital pharmacy. Orders for medicines are processed rapidly and made ready for clinical teams. Pharmacists say it improves patient safety by eliminating human error. Whether they're moving supplies around hospitals or having direct contact with patients, robotic devices are thought to offer potentially major long-term benefits to the NHS. But there are big questions over what that'll mean for patients' experiences and the impact on staff.
I'm excited about the increased use of technology in care homes, but also throughout the NHS. There's tremendous potential there. But of course, as a scientist, I want to see the evidence too. I want to make sure that things are safe, that they're effective, and that there are no unexpected side effects or consequences.
Are you going to make yourself a cup of tea?
They won't necessarily offer cups of tea or even look like this, but the fact that hospital leaders are working with engineers on robotics shows there is a radical vision for post-pandemic health and care. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
The death has been announced of the renowned Kenyan conservationist and politician Richard Leakey, whose groundbreaking discoveries helped to prove that humankind evolved in Africa. He was 77 years old. He led a team that found an almost complete skeleton of an upright man in 1984 and fronted the landmark 7-part BBC series, The Making of Mankind. Serving as head of Kenya's wildlife conservation body, he also led campaigns against poachers and the ivory trade. Now for a look at all the day's sports news, let's join John Watson at the BBC Sports Centre. Hi, John.
Good evening, Ben. Thank you. The big game today in the Premier League was at Stamford Bridge. If you're waiting for the scores on Match of the Day, you might want to avert your attention briefly with the spoils shared in a thrilling 2-2 draw between title rivals Chelsea and Liverpool, both losing ground on leaders Manchester City. The match, a landmark moment in the top flight as spectators standing return for the first time in 27 years, as Laura Scott reports.
Stepping into a new year and a new era for football.
A match day, Scouts.
Any game between Chelsea and Liverpool is important, but this clash took on even greater standing for supporters, marking the moment fans could legally watch on their feet for the first time since 1994.
This is a huge breakthrough and a victory for common sense, really, but a big step forward from the point of view of safety, but also customer choice. So people have the option now of standing legitimately and safely at football matches.
More than 12,000 of the seats at Stamford Bridge are located in the new licensed standing areas, which have barriers to prevent the risk of crowd collapse. Fans are still allowed to use their seats if they wish. The pilots will include 4 other clubs and will run for the rest of the season, with the possibility of standing being rolled out across the top 2 tiers next season. But there was a mix of opinion among those arriving at Stamford Bridge.
I think it's a better atmosphere when people are standing.
I think some fans really like it. I don't, maybe I'm too old.
Brilliant, because at Anfield we stand anyway in the cup.
Anticipation was high, with just 1 point separating the hosts in second and the visitors in third, and it quickly became an entertaining encounter, with 4 goals and frenzied celebrations by both sets of supporters, giving those monitoring the crowd's behaviour plenty in the way of data. For Chelsea's goalscorer Christian Pulisic, English football has finally caught up with what he experienced when playing for Borussia Dortmund.
I know it, seeing that from Germany a lot. I'm not sure, I definitely think that it could help the atmosphere. The atmosphere was brilliant, just from the fans in general, so it was, yeah, it could be.
The post-match analysis now begins for researchers too. But the early indications from Chelsea were that the trial had gone smoothly, a sense largely echoed by the fans.
To be honest, I think it's a good idea, people standing up again. It's what people want, and with a barrier, it's safe as anything.
I think standing works well. We were fine with it, so it worked well for us. Happy with it.
As long as they don't encroach on people that are sat down and everybody can see, then yeah, go for it.
Much like tonight's 2-2 draw won't determine the season, so this one pilot in isolation won't determine whether the law changes and standing becomes permanent. But both are significant moments to start the year. Laura Scott, BBC News, Chelsea.
Well, elsewhere today, there were wins for Leeds over Burnley, Brighton at Everton and Brentford over Aston Villa. The British men's number 2, Dan Evans, inspired Great Britain to victory over Germany in their opening match of the men's team tournament, the ATP Cup in Sydney. Evans showed some impressive early season form ahead of the first Grand Slam of the year, winning his singles match first and then combining with Jamie Murray in the doubles, the pair beating Alex Zverev and Kevin Krawietz. The victory coming barely a month after GB lost to the same opponents in the Davis Cup. And English Premiership leaders Leicester have made it 11 successive victories, beating Newcastle at Welford Road 31 points to 0. It was one of 3 matches in the English top flight. Elsewhere, the champions Harlequins came out on top in a tight encounter, beating Gloucester 20 points to 17. Danny Kerr with one of their 2 tries, while second-place Saracens were comfortable winners over Northampton Saints. And news tonight on 2 silver medals for Great Britain today at the Bobsleigh World Cup in Latvia. All the details on the BBC Sport website. That, though, is all from me for now. It's back to you, Ben.
John, thank you very much indeed. And there's more throughout the evening on the BBC News channel. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Goodbye and have a very good evening.